Hi, everyone. I'm thrilled to have four amazing leaders with me today to talk about the acceleration of digital transformation and what they're seeing personally across the board and share a bit of their personal experience of adopting with the change. And so let me kick off with a quick intro, starting with Miracle Boswell, who is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Move 78. I've also got Garrett Craig, Oracle's president of Japan and Asia. I also have with me Anupam Pahuja, who's an old colleague of mine from today serves as PayPal's vice president of India, South, Middle East, and Africa. And then, of course, last but not least, Depo. I knew I messed that up. Depo Sen, who is Citibank's managing director, head of treasury and trade solutions for Singapore and ASEAN. Now, to just get us started, I always like to start with a few sort of fun things, fun questions. So why don't we start there? What I thought we'd do is just go around, or actually start with Miracle and maybe Garrett, to find out a little bit more about you in terms of what did you really hoard during the pandemic. I will first to confess, I hoard more rice than I should, but that's what I did. What about you too? What did you hoard during the pandemic?
I honestly, we stocked up on Blanton's bourbon during the heavy lockdown period, so it got us through.
What about you, Garrett?
The environment where at the beginning I was in the United States, and the first 6 months of global lockdown between the United States and the second 6 months of what we're in right now, the lockdown, I spent in Singapore. And the strategy was very different in the United States. And early in the pandemic, it was hoarding things like canned groceries and some toiletries, as you've read in the newspaper. And a lot of people did that because the fear of supply chain disruption, which was completely overblown. But the good news is I've got plenty of toilet not lasting for a very long time. The second part of that pandemic, I moved from in Singapore to take on this role as head of Asia Pacific and Oracle. Landed in Singapore and saw the incredible infrastructure, the incredible control that the government and the people themselves have put to do their best in such a difficult situation. And what I much like Marco was just make sure my wine cabinet, everything else is in very good control here.
Thank you for sharing. Now let's, talk a little bit instead of hoarding. Maybe we talk about the great habits we picked up. Myself, I'd never get the chance to have lunch with my family, and I thought that was just a wonderful habit. Usually, if I'm lucky to have dinner, so I love to hear from Anupam, and then maybe Debo. What are the good habits you picked up during this pandemic?
Well, since you focused on good there, Ray, I can't talk about all the other vices I picked up, including taste for whiskey. But from a good perspective, I think I used to go to the gym a lot, and since all the gyms were closed, we ended up working out from our homes, and also walking around quite a lot. So like most people in the world, who are in our position, we travel a lot, right? You're hardly at home. This gave the pandemic really helped us stay at home and connect with our families in a way that has been more fulfilling and meaningful than it could have ever been. And so I would argue my best habit that I picked up was really connecting with my teenage kids in a way that I could have never done if I was traveling. So that's sort of my best habit, not the vices. Yeah.
Debo?
Um,
I think I did, and I did struggle with this way because you said good, right? Just like Anupam. I think the one good thing I did get to was something I decided to do 2 years ago when I first moved here, but I didn't get to, but I did get to in the pandemic was I started learning a new language, which was Mandarin, which was on my to-do list for a long time, and I've kept up with the classes, which is a good thing. I did also hoard chocolates while you didn't ask me that, but I thought it was important to mention.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for delighting me and making me feel ever more normal. I also picked up a whole host of bad habits, but who wants to talk about those, right? Next, why don't we just go ahead and get on with the panel? I love to sort of, to help frame this discussion. Why don't we start with the first question, which is, what have been some of the key drivers of digital growth in the financial services sector? And maybe we start with you, Debo?
Sure. I think I would say, like any industry, there are obviously forces that are shaping the financial services industry. And one would say the shift to digital is a part of the natural evolution. But I would actually call out about a couple of factors which I think have really driven that. And the first is really changing expectations and behaviors of our customers and clients, whether they're consumer clients, whether they're high net worth individuals or they're corporates, because eventually corporates and businesses are made up of individuals who are changing the way they live and they come to work and they live their lives. And I think, and nowhere is it more true than in Asia, where I think the pace of digital adoption has really been staggering. I mean, I'm sure everyone here in the audience is aware that 6 out of the 9 fastest growing internet economies in Asia, in the world, are in Asia Pacific, whether it's India, China, Korea, Indonesia, and even the Philippines, which has a very high rate of digital engagement. And added to that, I think just the consumer adoption of digital has also been something that really stands out globally. So, there was an estimate a couple of years ago that the number of digital consumers who will actually consume digital products in Southeast Asia will be around 320 million by 2025. But now with the pandemic, that's expected, that number will hit by the end of this year itself. So I think that first thing, entire demand and the changing expectations is driving financial service to deliver, to become far more digital and deliver digital services to their customers. If you take it in the business context, these same people who are buying online, shopping online, seeing a doctor online, and banking online on their personal banking are coming to work and demanding the same experience. And if you just look at the digital business to business commerce, if you think of financial services eventually as the industry that helps and supports commerce in the world, then I think the estimates say that about 65 trillion of the global ecosystems will shift to digital ecosystems. So just pure global commercial revenues. And that will drive a very large amount of payments to be digitized, because the minute you move something into the digital ecosystem, the payments have to be delivered digitally. So I think that has been a big shift, just the changing expectations of our customers, particularly true in Asia. And the second thing I would call out is I think governments, particularly in Asia, truly understand that every time you can leverage digitization to drive financial inclusion, and every time you bring more people into the formal economy, you add to your GDP and you pull more people out of lower incomes into middle income. And we are seeing huge government push that is supporting a lot of digital adoption and pushing the financial services industry to also cater to these requirements. So I would call these out as probably two big factors that are driving digitization in the financial services from my standpoint.
Wonderful. Garrett, what are you seeing as some of the key drivers?
One of the things
as
that
well.
is exciting, thank you. One of the things that's exciting about being at Oracle is that we've been driving digital transformation for the better part of 4 decades, well before the term became fashionable. And we've been out in Asia Pacific and Japan for 3 of those decades, over 30 years now. We've worked with companies like PayPal and Citibank, who are both on this panel. So it's exciting to be here with some great partners as well. I think the first thing that we're seeing is digital payments. They have to be easier, more convenient, more accessible, and more innovative, because the customers themselves are looking at not just features and functionality, but accessibility. And this is something that has to be built into the architecture. The second thing is that it has to be very real. You have to apply this, as was earlier spoken, to the standards of the government. So one of the things that Oracle's been focused on is the PSD2 initiatives and regulations that make the payments secure. Priority number one in the European landscape, and quite frankly, that around the world. The real-time payment system in the United States, and I, as a person who've lived in the United Kingdom, lived in Japan, lived in Hong Kong, and I'm living in Singapore, the incredible improvement on when I am working with my financial institution and I need to get something to pay a medical bill or something from my kid's school from New York into Singapore, it happens instantaneously now. That used to be at minimum an overnight process, and that improvement is exemplified by and used by all of us. And then ultimately, the interoperable infrastructures. We can no longer operate in a closed environment. Even if you're a financial institution, you cannot just say, I will allow you to do transfers in and out of your account amongst yourselves. You have to talk and work with the rest of the world. And I think this is big changes we've seen that are driving this transformation, because the customer is pushing all of us to do better, to be faster, to be more real time, and of course, be more open. And then the second aspect that I'd like to touch on is the fact that there's a lot of non-financial players in this environment, because basically the incumbents don't have control of the market anymore. The barriers have been lowered via digital infrastructure and architecture. So cloud technology is one of the things that has accelerated, and cloud technology is one of the things that have opened up this landscape. And you see companies like Singtel and Grab in Singapore with Digibank getting into the financial services business. And look what they bring to the party. They bring customers, they bring reach, they bring services, they bring the environment that transactions occur. So it's natural for them to look and build an e-payment infrastructure around those businesses, and of course open that up to the rest of the institutions around them. And I think this is a huge opportunity for all of us to innovate, progress, and expand. But it is definitely not an environment where if you fight this change or you isolate, or if I may build the fence around you thinking this will go away sometime in the future, it's not going to. This is the way, the openness we're all going to see. So I think ultimately, it really is about making sure that we embrace this change all the way through an organization and straight through the architecture or the technology the financial institutions are deploying to their customers, recognizing that the competitive barriers are lower, the stakes of the game are higher, but the opportunities are broader.
Couldn't agree with you more. Now, with that in mind, I'd just love to hear a bit more on, exactly how this has impacted your business or your clients' businesses. And maybe we hear a bit from Miracle and then from Anupam.
As far as how COVID has affected our business, we've seen a bit of an uptick in our phones ringing a little bit more, because as we consult companies that are looking to expand to Asia, everyone is realizing that Asia is recovering first from this pandemic. So we've been getting a lot of inquiries, inbound inquiries, and so it was a slight positive for us, but that's what we've seen.
Anupam, what are you seeing? And how is it impacting PayPal? Go ahead.
Yeah, certainly. PayPal is a digital-only company, right? So it had a tremendous impact. It has been a historical year, really, for PayPal. The pandemic has really resulted in what I would call a perfect storm, right? We've seen more innovation, and we will see more innovation in the digital space, digital financial space, over the next year or so than we've seen in the last 10 or 15 years. We have set ourselves a new normal where people are becoming more and more adept at moving to digital currency rather than using paper currency. And that's partly driven by the fact that people don't want to go out because of lockdowns, and also there's this whole aspect of germs and so on and so forth that's causing digital to take preeminence. PayPal, obviously being a 100% digital company, has been in the forefront of this, not only focusing on ensuring that people are able to transact wherever they are and with whoever they want to around the world, but also help in terms of the governments being able to get the money to the people in terms of incentives and such in a very quick and easy manner. We have had we're adding up upwards of 170,000 net new customers a day into the network, unheard of, before the pandemic. So it really has. We've seen a shift. I think as the lockdown eases, my sense is we're not going to go back to the old ways of doing things. We have and will arrive at a new normal, and we will all see where that new normal is, whether it is in the form of digital currencies we're talking about, or even in the form of cryptocurrencies, which have started to become a little more mainstream and moving from being an asset class to actually becoming a currency that we could transact with.
Yep. Now having sort of, cope with the increase, whether it's the phone ringing or the number of customers that you're picking up, love to hear a bit more about how your business helped other businesses or your clients' businesses respond to this, sudden change that's happening. And it would be so helpful to get a specific example of how you work with businesses to do just that. And perhaps we start with you, Garrett.
Certainly, and thank you. I'll give you 3 examples, and it's good to get specific. I think one of the things that we are focused on here at Oracle and in the entire technology vertical is really adding value to our customers to help them innovate. So a good example of where we've come from and worked with companies is Bajaj Finserv, and they're one of the most diversified non-financial banking institutions in India. We put infrastructure in Oracle terms. It's called customer experience, and Unity is a customer data platform that doesn't just take the data off the web. It takes the data from the entire infrastructure, and data being the operative word, not just a profile or a click, but everything that is actionable around that customer, and use it to deliver a customer experience. Because Bajaj is competing with an enormous landscape of companies that are coming from net new, the ground up, and established and embedded. And what they really need to do is to figure out not just how are they going to maintain the business they're in, but how are they going to build a better upsell and cross-sell across the opportunities that are around them. You can have a tremendous amount of business expertise and background, but the way to compete in the digital age is to understand and drive algorithms against these environments, and then sift out the segments and audiences that you can then promote to in order to generate transactions and opportunity. Bajaj uses the CDP platform, the customer data platform from Oracle, to make sure that it's building out the right profiles and then action on those profiles, and not, as they say, throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. They've got very targeted and very constructive, measured marketing initiatives that help them perform better. Another good example of what's happened is Square. They've improved their operational efficiency. They're a U.S. card that provides credit card payment processing solutions. They came and we basically worked with them to unify the infrastructure, build a fabric across their architecture for their enterprise resource planning, their performance management, and their supply chain, all in a cloud-native suite of solutions. And this was important, cloud being the operative word, because it's not only scalable, but it's very open so that it can be plugged into a lot of different environments. What was amazing was very quickly after this implementation, they were getting double-digit improvements on the KPIs they used to run their business. So again, big technology initiatives, but the most important part being the measure on the ROIs that they received and how that worked to improve their business and make them even more competitive in a very tough landscape. The last example is Ria. Ria is a global leader in money transfer services. They provide services in more than 160 countries, including Malaysia, Japan, and India. They went in and looked at the digital transformation from a different angle. We talk about transactions, we talk about supply chain, we talk about performance management, but how about the people? How about the people that work inside these companies? You're constantly having to upskill. You're constantly having to be very nimble and be progressive and innovate. And people are at the heart of all of our businesses. And at Oracle, our HCM, Human Capital Management Platform, sits in the middle of our application architecture. And what they used this technology for was to gain visibility on different kinds of data that all employees were giving them through different interactions that they were having with the company, and not only be able to understand the employee better, but be able to onboard net new employees, because as we all know, the skill sets are changing, and the velocity is increasing. So you have to bring people on faster, bring more people on, and be better at that. Again, it has to be measurable. And one of the things that we saw at RIA was they reduced their monthly payroll preparation from 4 days to 2 hours. And this is where people, they react positively. They want to work for firms that do react to them that well. And the game in digital transformation is having the best talent, and it's a very limited set of people that you can go to. So you've got to be really great to attract those people. And RIA was using these human capital management technologies to not just obviously work and better improve their people, but get great people in front of their customers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gareth, for those specific examples. Debo, do you have, could you share some of the specific examples of how Citi also facilitated or helped your clients' businesses?
Sure. I think, so I'll break it up into two parts. I think we, as the entire digital world has evolved, we've obviously worked with a lot of digital natives, right? PayPal being a great example. To support them to gain access into multiple markets. We work a lot with the gig economy, who are very focused on customer experience, some of the largest names. But I think what is truly exciting or also deeply satisfying is when you're able to help a client who has operated, who's not a digital native, and who has operated in the paper environment, in the manual environment, and is undertaking a journey of transformation over a period of time, which was probably a good to have a year ago, but now has become a necessity, right? And I'll talk through a couple of examples there. One is of a very large telecom company in one of the largest markets in Asia. As you can imagine, most of the Asian markets are prepaid markets, which means that you top up when you want an extra data package or you want a little more talk time. You usually go to the 7-Eleven or a mom and pop store, you pay cash and you top up, because most of these are very small individual accounts. And what we did with this telecom company was, during COVID, this was becoming a serious issue. And people more than ever needed their data packages, and they needed to top up their talk time. And we embarked on a transformation journey with them across multiple locations in this market, where we were able to digitize their entire payment experience for their customer, where they could pay online, on the phone, leveraging the instant payments networks. And we were also able to connect seamlessly with the client through API services, which would immediately let them know that the money has been received, and they can release the data packet or the top up or whatever services the client wanted to use. And this ramped up to, over the COVID period, because more and more people started using that, talking about adoption, right? This ramped up to about 10 million transactions a month, which is pretty huge for an industry which traditionally you think of, even in Singapore, you think of a physical bill arriving and you're then going to make a payment. So I think that was a great experience. We've also worked with an insurance company here in Singapore, AXA, where we help them digitize their entire customer policyholder experience. When they pay for a policy or when they have a claim, how can they get it instantly? How can they get acknowledgement instantly so that the transaction can be completed? And I think that is something we had started doing before the pandemic. And obviously, I think we're all very glad we did it before the pandemic, so that business could continue. And in fact, business ramped up significantly as well. A third example, which is also very interesting and very different, is not a consumer-facing business. It's a consumer goods company, very large, S&P 100, large consumer goods company in 9 markets in Asia. And they basically deal with distributors and retailers. And very often they're dealing with, again, the 7-Elevens all down to the smallest retailers. And as you can imagine, their entire payment and collection cycle of how they were able to collect from their retailers and distributors, and hence the quicker they collect, the quicker they reconcile, the quicker they get the information about money. As you know, as someone famously once said, information about money is more important than the money itself very often, right? So how quickly they can actually release their distributors limit means they can sell more. It's as simple as enabling sales. And we embarked on a 1 year journey with this client since the beginning of last year across 9 markets, market by market, where today they do all of their payments from a centralized factory, seamlessly connected to the bank, fully digital. And on the collection side, which is always harder because you not only have to change your behavior, your factory, your processes, you have to go educate your customers who are the retailers and the distributors. And they're doing a market by market journey where they've completely eliminated cash, and they're also on a path to eliminate checks. And now they're going more instant and much more digital. Now it's a long journey, but I think these are the really satisfying ones when you can take a legacy business and add tremendous value, and deliver a digital experience. And now they're even talking about paying excise in some of their biggest markets digitally through the use of virtual cards. So, once you start the journey, the possibilities are endless. But that first step is often quite complex. So I'll probably leave you there with those 2, 3 examples.
Yeah, it's such a monumental moment where you've got, a surge of change happening, making ROI, and also just really moving everybody towards the digitalization process. And I'm so grateful, really, for the audience as well as me to hear very specific and very relatable examples. But we all know that these changes, just as we talked about earlier with COVID, there's good, and then there's also the not so good or the harder part of doing this. So next, I'd love to just hear a little bit more about the big challenges, right? Taking on these heroic efforts of digital transformation at the moment. I'd love to hear about it, especially what we're seeing here in APAC. Maybe we continue with you, Debo, to hear a bit more about some of the bumpiness that you may have, experienced with all of the work that's happening to help the world digitalize.
I think I'll first start with the harder one, right, which is culture and mindset. I always joke with my kids that if you're born on the wrong side of the 80s, then you're not a digital native like they are. You're a digital immigrant, right? So for a digital immigrant to learn new tools is very different from my son, who the first screen he saw was a touch screen, right? So it's very different. So even when we are working with clients, we are learning new skills together. So I think that being able to upskill and being able to take everyone along on the journey, making sure everyone understands. You do not have to be a technologist, but do you understand the possibilities that the tech stack can deliver? And that's changing every day. I think that is a tremendous shift, first of all. I wouldn't call it a challenge, it's an opportunity, but definitely a process that cannot be wished away and has to be undergone. But just moving to Asia, I would say there are a couple of things. I think in our experience, we embarked on a journey about 1.5 years ago, I would say, to digitize corporate account opening with a bank. And many of you have opened corporate accounts with a bank, and you would know that it takes a long, long time, and it's not a fun experience. We embarked on this very ambitious journey to make that a digital experience and make that a very quick experience. And I think the biggest process or journey that we had to undergo there was to go country by country, market by market, deeply understand. The devil really is in the deep detail of what is permitted by the regulation. Do you have a database you can do online checks with? Can you connect to them with APIs? If you don't, then how do you digitalize the paper? How do you sometimes go work with the government, and hopefully change some of the rules or take special approval? How do you yet embark on that digital journey, but adhere to the data privacy rules in a particular market? So there's that constant tug of war between experience and protection, right, which we've had to undergo. But I think the good news is that it can be done. I mean, a year and a half on, we are live in 49 markets around the world. In Asia, we are live in 14 markets. We've opened 4,200 accounts purely digitally without a single piece of paper in the corporate world. If someone had told me this a year ago, I would have not believed it. So I think but it's that hard work that has to be done, and the lack of consistency and standardization amongst our very fragmented markets, which is also part of the opportunity, is I think just makes the journey a little longer. Coming home to payments, I would say there is work to do for us in Asia Pacific in terms of bringing home consistency on how we look at 24 by 7 payments. A lot of the payment systems are designed with only consumers in mind. And we don't realize that if we don't digitize the business experience, we are not going to do away with paper in the market. So I think just constantly talking to the participants, to the clearing utilities, to the central banks, to make them aware that when you design an instant payments platform or a wallet integration platform, if you can weave in business requirements versus only P2P requirements, I think that will immediately add to the digital experience in the country. I think that's something that we do. There are inconsistencies in how settlement risk is perceived. Sometimes the level playing field is not always even. Sometimes how regulators and governments look at liquidity requirements for a 24/7 world is not always consistent. So I think, and the final thing I would say, Garrett spoke about the power of data, which is incredible, and how you can provide deeply personalized and customized experiences. But the rules around how you can navigate data in a region like Asia Pacific, I think also add to some of the challenges. These are all things which I'm sure will get evened out along the way, but you almost have to go through the journey, and these are things that we probably have work to do on.
Absolutely. Maybe I turn it over to Anupam to share a bit about some of the challenges that you may be seeing with all work that's happening right now with digital transformation.
Yeah, I think Debo hit upon a lot of good points, right? First, let's agree, digital has moved from being a nice to have to being an essential service, right? There's no sort of doubt in anybody's mind there. What I feel is COVID and the pandemic has really exposed a clear divide between the people who have had a strategy and people who have not, right? And you've seen the people who had a digital first strategy of, where they are in terms of, the market share. And my sense is that SMBs, the small businesses, which is really the lifeblood of most economies, 98% of the businesses in APAC are really small businesses. They've been the most impacted, right? They forget a digital approach. They don't even have a digital mindset. They don't know. These like mom and pop stores. How do you get them to accept digital payments or do things, transact digitally? It's a huge challenge for them, right? And then if you look at how do you start transforming them, even in normal times, transformation of any sort is a difficult process. Let alone when you cannot even go out and talk to anybody or meet anybody. How are you going to transform in these times, right? They have to evaluate their business workflows, tasks, roles. Employees need to be trained. We talked a lot about some of this here with Debo and Garrett. So I feel that it's one is how do you get the transformation started? That's a huge challenge. Then how do you actually implement it and change the culture of the workforce? And the workforce is not necessarily even with you at work, right? They're working from home. So you're grappling with a lot of different challenges. And I sense that quick fixes to digital strategies are not sustainable. Just can't put a sort of lipstick on a pig or put duct tape and make sure that it works. Right? You got to fundamentally move. And the way to do that, honestly, is not to do it yourself. Not try to be the master of all. Partnerships, I would argue, would be key to enabling, especially these small businesses. Leverage the likes of a Citi or an Oracle if you are, if you need to do so, and not try to do everything yourself. And I think mobile is going to be a key to unlocking the opportunities up front, right? There was a time, at least, in PayPal, we used to talk about mobile first. Whenever you're thinking of doing digital transformation, think of mobile first, not the desktop. I feel, especially in APAC, it is mobile only, not mobile first. In that a lot of these small businesses don't have PCs and desktops and databases, that they work from at home. They have basically a phone. and how do you look at that as the way to make things happen, right? I mean, I was talking to a founder of a startup in Indonesia yesterday, and over the pandemic, they've had a great success. Their focus is on doing accounting for small businesses in Indonesia. And they started the company literally a year ago, and the founder was telling me they're valued at $200 million because they focused just on basics of getting accounting done for these small merchants, right? The Kirana stores, as we call them in India. And finally, I think for these SMBs, cash flow, working capital is the lifeblood, right? So easy access to credit, ability to underwrite these small merchants, and ability for them to really unlock their potential would be one of the challenges that I would argue.
Well, beyond the sort of the challenges, thank you so much for the sharing. It really definitely sparked a lot of thoughts in my mind. And with that, I also love to just talk a little bit more about the unintended consequences, right? All of a sudden, all of these changes with everybody trying their best to sort of keep up with everything. Clearly, there will be some unintended consequences. And so that demographic shift of adoption is now sort of, creating most likely some sort of a split. And I like to just turn it over maybe to Mariko to share a little bit more about what she's seeing as sort of the upside and so as well as the downside of all this pace of change and the adoption.
Sure, thanks. Well, there's no doubt that innovation has been spurred on at a rapid rate because of this pandemic. So that's an upside. And also, this is a double-edged sword, but the pandemic has also laid bare all the issues as far as inequality for everyone to see. So hopefully it's raised greater awareness for these issues to spur on more innovation towards inclusion and access to services. And so hopefully that'll happen faster. The downside is, of course, that these inequalities were exacerbated by the pandemic. And if you look at distance learning, for an example, it was fine if you had connectivity and a laptop, but there are many families in different markets that didn't have that. So, and as far as remote working, for highly skilled laborers, 50% could work remotely, no problem. But if you were less skilled, chances are only 30% of you could do the same. So basically, workers in informal markets were completely out of luck. So the pandemic, I mean, it's great that technology and innovation has happened faster, but we just need to be careful that we're not leaving people in the dust. So that's
That's a good point.
No, those are great points. Anupam, anything else to add to this important?
Yeah, I think you hit close to home when you talked about people, it's uneven playing field for sure, right? And
yeah.
and Mariko talked about workforce. That hits close to home. As an example, you could be living in a nice apartment, or you could be living with 3 generations of family in a small apartment, right? And how do you sort of then compete with another worker who may be having all the facilities and versus another worker? So just to talk about PayPal here for a second, we decided at PayPal that we will not do annual reviews this year, and everybody's going to get the same bonus, because it has really created, even in companies like PayPal, between colleagues, an uneven playing field. So that's an example that hit very close to home. Mariko, thanks for bringing it up. So just to talk about some of the things that I see that are happening. First of all, we're seeing new segments, right, that are emerging. I think Debo talked about, telemedicine, edutech, the distance learning, Mariko called it. I think these are new segments that we've never seen before take off in the way that they really have. And the world is becoming a smaller place to play, in that, you have now an ability, a person sitting in India as a freelancer could teach, native in Indian dancing to somebody sitting in the U.S., right, or vice versa. Somebody could learn English sitting in a remote corner, these were not prevalent, and people were afraid to do these kinds of things. But we're seeing now they're becoming more and more, mainstream. The other thing we're seeing is also new segments of consumers coming into play. We've even coined the word silver tech, right? These are new generation of people who have never really, been. I think you called it digital immigrants, right? So we have new sort of digital immigrants who are or visitors. Forget immigrants, right? I mean, that are showing up transacting digitally. These are people typically in the 50 to 70-year-old age brackets who are. We're seeing a huge, surgence of these. So I think the lines between online and offline are blurring, right? And there is no such thing today as offline versus online. It's just kind of blending together. But with this blend, it also brings about certain downsides, right? I mean, including the risks associated with going digital, right? Bad actors, it's easier for them to play now, given that everybody's digital, right? So people who are, for example, silver tech, are putting their information online may not have all the abilities to manage that information online. So the bad actors, are emerging in a bigger way than ever, and they're exploiting all the loopholes possible. And I think this risk that we're seeing, of people hacking in, personal information being stolen, can really hamper the growth of, especially the new segments we're seeing. And therefore, I think consumer education is going to be critical, right? Being able to really, the layman terms, explain to people and companies, small businesses that are coming online, not only the benefits of going online, but also the risks associated with it. And those are very, very real risks. I think there are companies, not to plug PayPal, that can help in the process, Citibank and others. But I feel we are again setting a new normal for ourselves, and the world is not going to be the same after the pandemic, and we all have to be ready for it.
Wonderful. Well, before I head into the wrap-up question, I wanted to ask all the audiences to submit your questions. After this question, we're going to go into the Q&A, and we've heard lots of very, very informative insights, and I want to urge you all to do that. All you have to do is to click or go there your thoughts box and submit your question. All right, now for the wrap-up. Love to just hear a little bit more. I mean, Anupam started off on a bit of the trend that he's seeing, but I'd love to just hear what do you think are sort of key emerging trends in FinTech for 2021 and beyond? Lots of things happening. And so, Mariko, maybe start with you, and then Garrett, you bring it home for us.
Sure.
Sure, thanks. Oh, yeah, okay, sorry. I see basically three things, three main things. Consolidation, first and foremost, a lot of partnering, a lot of activity based upon, the digital banking licenses being issued, and then it's rippling throughout Southeast Asia and Malaysia coming up as well. So there's a lot of activity that way. One thing I'm hopeful about, and Anupam touched on this, I really am hoping to see a greater responsibility in tech. As far as innovators and solution providers and their potential institutional partners, looking ahead to see what the potential downsides are, like helping to provide that extra little bit of education to their customers. Like, hey, especially to the silver demographic that you were talking about. Yeah, that term. Hey, watch out for this. This is what you might want to do with your passwords. Best practices are every month you might want to change it. Just little things like this, I think will go a long way to help bring everybody along with this surge in tech and technological advancement, to bring everybody along at the same time. It just takes a little bit of information like that. So also, I think there's going to be especially because of COVID, a new awareness of financial wellness as opposed to just financial inclusion. Financial inclusion was a buzzword for the past few years as far as getting people online, but everybody knows it's kind of a binary term. If somebody has an app, then they're included, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to thrive or be resilient and financially sound. So I think the new focus will be financial wellness for everybody to be able to obtain financial security and resilience. So those are the three things I see.
Garrett?
Thank you very much. And I'm going to try to button together a couple of the thoughts that we've heard today, because they're all such tremendous points put out by my fellow panelists. I think the big thing that's going to be front and center in FinTech for 2021 and beyond is going to be virtual banking. And there's a couple of reasons for that. You can see, as is evident, that many brick and mortar banks are working to experiment or at least innovate into the digital banking environment, and they are going virtual. I have Japanese customers that are launching virtual banks in the Philippines. I have obviously Singaporean partnerships that are coming up in Singapore that will quickly spread to Malaysia and Indonesia. We have a host of companies and banks in the Indian landscape that are basically initiating new businesses, digital from the ground up. There is no bricks and mortar, nor are there four walls. But I want to be careful in that a virtual banking doesn't mean it's a completely separate set of institutions and there's a either or statement. I think you're going to see a both. My relationship with Citibank has been over 35 years, and I have had a tremendous respect for their technology. They are the company that I talked about that moved me into the real-time environment and gives me the ability to cross borders, cross currencies, and take care of my obligations literally at the click of a button on my mobile phone. So in many ways, that's a virtual bank because I don't have to go into a branch to touch that. But then there are, as we described earlier, things like Digibank and the licenses being given out in Singapore, companies that will never have an office or a front door to go through, and they will relate and engage with their customers and then across the internet. This landscape is going to play out fast and hard. If you look, at least in Asia Pacific, you're seeing a race in Hong Kong and Singapore. Hong Kong has issued, I think it's 8 virtual licenses. Singapore has committed that we'll have 4 digital full bank licenses. They've already begun to award them. So in many ways, the incumbents that have, if I may, legacy architecture are working hard to transform. And with that, they're going to be adding new services, new capabilities. And then if I may, the newcomers to the market are going to start with those innovations ground up. And I think ultimately what it's going to do, and I'm going to bring together some of the great points made by my fellow panelists, is that there's going to be more financial responsibility by the financial institution, not just by the customer, because personalization will give more than just a recommendation of what service can I sell you next. It'll also give you a recommendation of what can you afford. What are you positioned for? What is best for you? And things like wealth management or insurance or home loans, tuition saving for your kids, as well as your own financial management, with AI and ML coming into play, these should not be feared. They should be looked at as a value add. And virtual banking, I think, will accelerate this. Now, there are the concerns, as was earlier put, is security and privacy. And I am absolutely overwhelmed to some extent with how front and center and immediate the financial industry, the financial vertical, takes those 2 points of privacy and security, more so than retailers, more so than travel and hospitality, certainly more so than some of the peripheral services like entertainment. So I think in FinTech, we have good responsible leadership. It can always get better, but good responsible leadership that is taking privacy and security front and center, adding value and service, and taking more and more responsibility for the relationship with the customer as they expand their capabilities through the digital landscape to say, I'm not just going to try to sell you stuff. Let me show you what's good for you based on the information you've given me, information that I will protect, I will value, and I will secure. And I think that's what you're going to see, not in the next decade, but in the next couple of years, if not quarters, as these virtual banks launch, and whether they launch from an incumbent institution that builds a subsidiary or a new venture, or they come in the form of a completely new entity coming online in digital format, front and center. It's going to be a really exciting landscape that I think will be better, more approachable, more reachable, more responsible, better for people and better for more people.
Wonderful. What a great summary. Thank you so much, Garrett. I want to once again remind the audiences out there to feel free to submit your questions via the share your thoughts box. So far, I'm not seeing any questions just yet. So with that, I will go ahead and actually ask a few more questions. And for this round, I just thought I'd open up to anyone who may have more things they'd like to share. We talked a lot about the changes that you are leading and you're supporting the businesses that you support. I'd love to just hear, like, what do you think is the most critical change you are leading right now at this deal with the new normal? So anyone who wants to share, I mean, this is something a little bit more specific to your moments right now that I love to hear in terms of what is it that you believe you are leading that is most critical?
I can take a stab at it, right? It's an interesting shift in our strategy overall as a company. PayPal has been known, to be a online payments provider, right? You press a button and you get your payments through. What we realized through the pandemic is that, honestly, this is something that the Asian majors had figured out a long time ago, but we're just getting around to it. Is that people don't want to have payments separated from transacting, separated from messaging, separated from investment, separated from banking, separated from, all these different ways people have to move and manage their finances. They're all looking to go to one place, a consolidated place, so that they can invest, they can move and manage their money, they can pay their friends, they can pay for a restaurant, they can do everything in one place. So where PayPal has shifted now and is to move away from just being an online player, not move away, but add on to being just an online payment provider, to be more of a super app and allow people to move and manage their money all in one location. So that's a huge shift in our strategy, and predominantly, I would argue, driven by what we've seen, precipitated by the pandemic, and we believe that to be the new normal as we move ahead. So I'll stop there. Yeah, I think that's a huge shift in what we're doing because of the pandemic.
And I think I can certainly also just add a little bit on my own thought about SMBs, just, again, the simplifying way of which they engage on taking on something that is daunting and having one place to go. It's very natural and seems to make a lot of sense to me. Anyone else like to share the critical change they're driving right now?
I'll share. One of the initiatives that we're working on touches on what I was talking about before. In partnership with Financial Resilience Australia, we are launching the APAC Financial Wellness Initiative. It actually soft launched last quarter, and it's a cross-sectoral network, APAC-wide, to address these issues. I'd love to welcome all of you on board as well.
Let's talk about it for sure. Anyone else?
I just have a quick comment. Go ahead, please. After you.
Okay, thanks, Garrett. So very quickly, I think, we spoke about the payments transformation that we are helping drive for a lot of our clients. But I think one of the things I'd like to talk about is, I think the consumer businesses, including consumer-facing financial services, individual financial services businesses, have traditionally done a better job of using data to personalize their customers' experience and also provide more insights to them that they may not be aware of, right? But I think we are doing that a lot more on the corporate side of the business. We're doing that much more industrial strength. We're doing that at a push of a button. It's becoming a lot more prevalent to go to a customer and say, you know what, these are your stated KPIs. This is the amount of free cash flow you want to generate. This is what you've committed to your investors. And this is what all your data is showing us. And these are the ways that you can move the needle and how you can impact your stated KPIs because of the insights that we have. It's one thing to do that for one or two customers, but to be able to do that for a large range of clients and actually present that insight in a way that's usable and changing and dynamic, I think it's a cultural shift as well. but it's also being able to build that capability, and I think that's one of the most exciting things that we're working on.
Wonderful. Garrett?
Sorry, Garrett, go ahead.
And no, not at all. Thank you. The one comment that I'd like to leave the audience with, as well as my fellow panelists, is that there is also outside of the industry, outside of just what we're talking about here with FinTech, one of the things that I've seen in my career, and it's never been more important than now, is the ability to innovate self. Now, self-innovate is when you motivate yourself to create and move, your ideas and goals forward, and create that with a self persistence. But innovate self is to constantly reinvent. And we, and that's for everyone on this Zoom session, on this call, need to look at ourselves and say, what do I need to be able to continue to progress into this very uncertain, very dynamic, and very exciting future? And as a personal example, I started my career in semiconductors as a design engineer for 256K DRAMs, which was many, many years ago. I have been through the motion picture business. I have done information services in the financial market. I've been in the applications market with companies like Adobe. I've participated in Java with companies like WebLogic, BEA, and I'm in an application infrastructure cloud company right now. The progression is not follow the compensation plan. It's just something that we as human beings need to look at post-pandemic and realize things are going to move faster. There is no given state of consistency. The only constant will be change. And as we look at ourselves day in and day out, how do we innovate self to make sure that we're prepared, we release legacy, we don't hold on to the past, and we figure out ways to do good things? And I think that I've heard that through this session. It is important to take responsibility for those that you vend to. That this is a partnership, and technology makes that much more transparent. But as you innovate self, think about what's next and what you and your passions bring you, because with that, you will progress and you will think and create great new ideas that obviously help people, but also bring value. And with value, there will be business, there will be commerce, and there will be reward. So that's something that I've heard on the peripheral of this digital transformation discussion. And I think as individuals, we need to bring it to the middle, because we as people, it's not technology, it's not bits and bytes that drive these transformations, it's human beings. The bits and bytes and technology are just the tools.
I am so inspired by that note. Thank you so much, Garrett. I myself personally is on a bit of that journey where I've spent my entire career in FinTech. But right now, about when it comes to doing good, I'm actually spending a bit of time looking at sustainability and climate change, just because I think that might be the next thing in terms of, what I do think in terms of my own self-innovation and how I can actually continue to contribute to the world at large. Well, that's a wrap. Believe it or not, our hour is up. It's so quick. And thank you so much. I mean it from the bottom of my heart, as I vulnerably admitted to you, this is the first panel I've ever moderated. I've spoken as a panelist, but not moderator. So thank you so much for bearing with me, and thank you, everybody. And I also want to give a shout out to AmCham for bringing us together. I think it was Churchill who said to never waste a crisis. Based on what I've heard today and what I've learned, we are not wasting anything. And in fact, I hope that we will continue to pick up the great habit of what the world has given us and continue to self-innovate. And with that, it's a wrap. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Very much.